Boy, they are very bold to be doing this. I gotta say, Sega is extremely bold to ask their player base what they just asked them in regards to this whole, you know, would you recommend this game to a friend or family? Well, I can tell you right now, my answer to that is no. It's always been like that for at least for a long time now. Y'all are aware of this. This is nothing new. I'm not here to bash things. We're going to go over this. I'm going to show you how brave they were to actually ask their player base this question. And I'm going to tell you the reasonings behind why my answer to that is no. And has been no for a long time. Some of y'all are very well aware of the underlying roots for this. But nonetheless, let's dive into this. Because they're bold to ask this in the way that they asked it. We're going to show you. Hey, yo, but first, be sure to like and subscribe. Helps out tremendously. I appreciate you very much. Thank you. All right, y'all. So for those who are not aware, if you go to the SEGA website, you'll see over here that they have a survey here. So it reads as such. Please respond to the SEGA Corporation's customer survey. A request from SEGA Corporation Customer Survey Office. Thank you for participating in our July customer survey. The customer service office greatly appreciates your feedback as it helps us further improve our services. We plan to continue sharing your feedback with our development and operations teams through, let me zone out of here, through future surveys. Thus, we are conducting another customer survey. The submission period is listed below. We would greatly appreciate your participation. All right, so yeah, so you go in here. So you're gonna go in here, and I kind of put this off for a little bit because it's been active since the 26th, ends on the 2nd, because I figured it was going to take some time, right? I figured I'd have a whole bunch of questions and stuff like that. Well, not quite. So I go to survey response. Please use this form to answer the survey. And it goes to this. It gives a little precautions regarding collected data and all that stuff. And then, of course, you read over that. If you want to read over more, then you can. But of course, you agree. And then you go to next. And this is it. Let me zoom that in just to make sure y'all can all see that. That's it. Player survey. PSO2 New Genesis version 2. How satisfied are you with PSO2 New Genesis version 2? Please give your answer as a rating between 1 and 5 stars. How likely are you to recommend New Genesis to family or friends? So when I went in here, I believe I gave it a 2 for how satisfied are you? I believe I gave it a 2. And then for how likely are you to recommend, I give it a 1. Now, as 1 is not likely, as you can see here, not at all likely. 10 is very likely. Now, there's reasonings behind this, and we're going to kind of go over some of these reasons, y'all. Now, for this one that I gave a 2 for very dissatisfied, it's simply, if you were to have asked this question 2 years ago or 3 years ago, it would probably be a 3. It's more so a 2 because we are in the state right now within the game where we already know what the state is, and it is just kind of a milking state. Matter of fact, I just saw before I did this, speaking of milking states, I just saw this too, as I was about to record this, where they're releasing new Larzi class augments, the Urza class, but also some new EX augments. So I guess these are pay-to-win EX augments. It's becoming more pay-to-win. So I think they're from scratch as well. Yeah, that kind of goes to show the state of things. But nonetheless, as you can see here, this is where we were at with our choice here. And now this one right here, how likely are you to recommend? When I submitted it, I went back and I kind of thought, and I was like, well, maybe I should have put it a 3. But realistically speaking, it probably would still be a 1. And so a lot of this very dissatisfied is just simply because the state of the game. It's just, we know it's not going anywhere. We haven't had a story update. and a real story update. We know we're not going to get one for forever. We're never leaving alpha. You know, it's just there's there's good in the game, but too much of the state of the game just is not enjoyable at the moment. Now, how likely are you to recommend PSO2 New Genesis to a family or friend? That would be a 1 because of those things I listed above, and of course the grand scope of things within the game. Now, the highlights of the game definitely would be things such as the gameplay. Y'all all know I am a big advocate for the gameplay of this game. I enjoy the gameplay. I think they did a great job with the combat in this game and with how diverse every class works. I think they did a great job with that, and I will always stand by that. It's the only thing that really keeps me in the game is the combat. However, that's simply not enough because while the combat's fun and all, there's not a whole lot of things to really be running. There's not reason to run things. There's no progression. There's no story. There's no new maps. It's the same mobs ultimately that are just slightly revamped. Sometimes they have a sombrero and they have maracas in their hands, but nonetheless, they're the same mob. So there's some diversity, and you know I always applaud that when there's some diversity and they release something that has different attacks and different type of movesets and stuff like that. But ultimately, it's the same stuff ultimately, right? So it's hard to really overlook that, even as much as I enjoy the combat. And like I said, I think the combat is amazing. The combat in this game is really great when you're playing different classes because every class, every weapon operates the same. If you're stuck in one class, you will not experience that. But they did a phenomenal job with making each class and each weapon operate in such a uniquely different manner. And that much I will always applaud in this game. Now, don't get me wrong, there has been, you know, highs throughout the years. Of course, when they were first releasing like the regions and stuff like that, you know, when they were first coming out, of course that was a highlight. Naturally, that was a very fun time because it was all fresh, it was all new. But, you know, you have multiple years of them not releasing any new regions, and they're not going to release any new regions. And then they release kind of like these half cooked, half baked, you know, kind of zones that they kind of make as field updates or that they want to present as a region, but they're not really regions and they don't operate as such. You know, I'm like, kind of looking at you, name of the city, but they they have these things and they put these things in the game or Ultra Realm, whereas Ultra Realm is, you know, ultimately just reuse assets from the regions that we have here and then to kind of make it look different, which they did an okay job with the Tundra one here recently, which makes you really feel like you're not in the exact same zone that you were in, like you were in the prior one before that, the Redham one, where it was like, okay, this is obviously Redham, bro. But ultimately, it's just not enough in that regard. It's not enough. So as much as I love the gameplay, it does not and cannot overshadow or you know or justify the lack of, you know, progression of the story or the areas, you know, being the same more or less nowadays. It cannot, and you're constantly reminded of that. No matter what they put into the game, you're constantly reminded of the fact that you were on Halfa and that you were never leaving Halfa. If there was another region in this game, would be great, absolutely great. That would have been, you know, phenomenal. And that's probably what they wanted to do if it weren't for some things that really kind of disrupted their plans and trajectory for the game. And y'all know what these are. I've discussed these before on numerous occasions. That is the community, and that's where we're going to next. That is really the biggest reason why I would never recommend this game to anyone, to family or friends. Family or friends is specific. Now, don't get me wrong. If we're like in the middle of a conversation and you bring up PSO, oh yeah, I'll be like, oh, have you played NGS, you know, PSO2 NGS? But I will never just bring it up. I will never just bring up PSO2 NGS to anyone I know, ever. Simply because of the community. That's the biggest number one thing. It's often that the game, it's often that, like, you know, I wouldn't recommend them playing the game because the combat can be fun, you know, but the community is why I would never. Simply put. So the community. This is namely a global side deal. Well, it is a global side deal. Y'all already know this. Y'all have heard me talk about this over the years. Y'all have heard me, speak on this on numerous occasions. And y'all know that this is why the game is in the state that it's in. Because the global version of PSO2 NGS was so poorly mishandled, and mismanaged by the people placed in positions of power over the game in a SOA. It was so poorly managed, and they left the game and its community wander into a haven for all the worst types of behaviors. And these types of behaviors were promoted by people in positions of powers. And pretty much all they did by doing this was they decided to focus on like a 1% of a player base and completely ostracize the other 99%. And that is why NGS is in the state that it's in. Because Global was never able to produce the revenue it was intended to produce. Because of this, because of the mishandling and the mismanagement of it on the global side. And everything funnels back to Japan, right? Everything funnels back to Japan. So that directly impacts the game, the development of the game, by Global not pulling in the revenue that it was expected to pull in. You feel me? So the community in itself has always just historically been a huge issue. It never fully stops. Like I got on yesterday and was running some of my LTQs and stuff like that, and very shortly after I logged on, I stumbled into some weird conversation in the Alio about people of underage and actions that you shouldn't be discussing. Obviously, you get where I'm going with that. While it's gotten better in the NGS, it's still allowed to be there on global, and it still very heavily exists. Because the fact of the matter is that the culture within the game was allowed to take that route by the people placed in positions of power who likely believe in that same thought process or things that are okay or whatnot. It was allowed to take that route. And as a result, the community was allowed to fester in that cesspool of type of behavior, which is the worst type of way that you want a MMORPG to exist. Because the fact of the matter is, like I said, you are satisfying a 1%. No matter how vocal or whatnot these individuals may be who like this type of stuff, they are a 1% or less than, especially within the MMORPG scene. Especially the 99% of the player base does not want to get onto a game and deal with that type of stuff. They don't. The 99% just want to get onto a game, enjoy great social experience and a great gameplay experience, and not have to deal with all the weird stuff like that. That's 99% of people. And SEGA let their global side be thrown around and waved around and tossed into all the acid and just completely eaten and burned alive to the point where there was no coming back. And as a result, you get no revenue. And with no revenue means you cannot develop the way that you want it to develop the game. So very shortly after, by the pretty much probably around a year and a half or so within the game's life, you are now making these changes on the corporate level of the direction that the game can go. Because global is not pulling in the revenue that you initially had the scope that it was going to pull in. It's not pulling that in. So now you have to adjust everything that you want to do into the game to be designed and funneled around a certain amount of money, a lesser amount of money. And that is how this game got into this continued decline. It all stems from global. And I'm not trying to bash or try to point fingers. No, I'm just telling it to you the exact real way that it is. You don't necessarily have to like it, but I'm just telling it to you. This is what happened. That is why this game is in the state that it's in. Period. It's that simple. But nonetheless, that is the biggest reason why I would never recommend this game to family or friends. It's because the community is just has always been just out of pocket. Don't get me wrong, there's plenty of great people in the game. But the fact of the matter is that it's too normalized for these poor behaviors to exist. Because they existed on a higher level of people in positions of management who will promote these types of behaviors. So as a result, it will forever be something that is an issue within the game. And you notice how on JP side, they don't deal with any of this. That's why the JP experience is so much different, because they don't deal with any of this. Of course, unless you're on ship 2, which is the foreigner ship. So you're essentially on global anyway. So if you're on ship, oh, I play on JP on ship 2. No, you don't. You play on global that happens to be on JP side. That's what ship 2 has always been. It's always been the foreigner ship for as long as it can date back. But that is the big reason why I would choose, or why I chose 1. And like I said, I thought before or after I sent it, I was like, maybe it would be a 3. But realistically speaking, there's really no situation where I would ever recommend this game to family or friends. If I feel like I would be doing a disservice. Like it's pretty much like the game makes you feel embarrassed to play it. But I think that's probably one of the best ways to play it. It makes you feel embarrassed to play it. So I would never recommend it to family or friends, ever, because I would not want them to be in that environment. They don't deserve to be in that environment. It would be a disservice to them. It would almost be rude to do so. It would, like, recommending the game would almost be like me saying, "Hey, I don't care about you," or "I don't care about your mental health," or "I don't care about your exposure to a whole bunch of weird people who might try to harass you and manipulate you or say things to you or stuff like that." Like, no, I do care. So why would I recommend this game with the community knowingly being like that? Doesn't make much sense, right? Doesn't make much sense. So that's kind of where we stand at there. But I figured I would give this video, because I was like, yo, dude, they're super bold for actually having a survey that's just, how likely are you to recommend PSO2 and just to family or friends? Like, bro, that's straight up with a freaking 1 to 10. That is very straight up, very bold, because they know they're going to be receiving a lot of under 5s. Like 5 and unders is definitely the average. Probably like 4. I imagine 4 is probably like the average, for sure. I imagine it is for global anyway. For JP, probably like 6 or something like that, I imagine. But they're bold for this one. At any rate, y'all, that's kind of just what I wanted to go through there and kind of discuss about this, because the answer is definitely no. I would not recommend. And it's been like that for a while now. Like I said, I enjoy the game. I wish that the game had been managed much better. I think that the game was 100% necessary. Base PSO2 was done and over with. Base PSO2 was done and over with in JP in 2017 when they started introducing silent classes. That's when Base PSO2 took a major hit. NGS was necessary because they had been using the same format of PSO2, like that same format they had been using for 20 years up until NGS came out. PSO episode 1 and 2, even PSU and PSO2, all those follow the same exact format. Every single one of them did. So naturally, of course, PSO2 was very easy to develop for because it followed the same format that the game has been using, the franchise has been using for forever. NGS was necessary because they needed to break away from that mold. I 100% agree with NGS being made. NGS being made was the correct choice, 100% for the franchise. However, how they handled it, particularly on the Western end, the Western front, how it was handled would prove to be absolutely detrimental for not only the game but the franchise itself, because they ostracize their almost entire player base and they gamble to essentially target and focus on a less than 1%. And that was not a smart gamble. Anyway, y'all, that about wraps this one up. This survey is available for a little bit, like 24 hours or something like that, right? I think it expired. Let's see here. It expired. Let's see. Yeah, so it's 20, whatever. It's probably better that I did this video later, so that way, you know, people who do see it, maybe, you see it after the voting. Because on stuff like that, you know, I want people to be genuine with it. So I want people who are actually playing the game to be doing these customer surveys. Whereas, like, you know, a lot of times they have surveys like this, and you'll get people who haven't played the game in a year. They come and they do the survey. No, I'm very much someone who believes that, you know, it's important to have actual valuable information from those who are playing the game, not just people who, oh, I despise this game, played it a year ago, I got banned, I'm gonna come here and you know, give a bad survey. No, I mean, it's like, sure, you're gonna have people who do that regardless, but I think that's on them, a waste of time. It kind of shows their state of mind to do stuff like that in the first place. But uh, I'm very much someone who prefers, you know, credible sources, and I think it's important that people who actually play the game are giving input on this. So, but at any rate, that's me for this one, y'all. That's me for this survey. That's where we're at here. We're at 1 and we're at 2 on the very dissatisfied. So this 1 is just being nice, because 0 is saying, you know, it's never 100% that I would never recommend it. But it's just, this may as well be 99.9% that I would never recommend it. So just giving some room there to family and friends. But at any rate, y'all, let me know what y'all did on this. Be sure to comment down below, y'all. And like, subscribe. I appreciate it very much. It helps out tremendously. And let me know down below whichever you need to say. So I'll see you in the next one. Much love. Holla.
Spike content.